The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness around a distant planet. It was bigger than most cities, with millions of beings living and working inside its metal walls. For 300 years, this station had been the center of power for the Galactic Dominion, the empire that ruled over 800 star systems. Admiral Taemin walked through the long corridors of the station. His blue skin showed he was from the Altarian race, one of the founding members of the Dominion. He wore the black uniform of the Dominion fleet, with golden marks showing his high rank. Today felt different from other days. There was tension in the air that made everyone nervous. The emergency meeting had been called just 2 hours ago. Emergency meetings were rare in the Dominion. Most problems were solved quickly with overwhelming force or threats. No one challenged the Dominion anymore. The last species to try had been wiped out 50 years ago as an example to others. Taemin entered the main council chamber. The room was huge, with seats arranged in circles going up to the ceiling. Representatives from dozens of different alien species sat in those seats. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked almost like humans, but with strange colored skin or extra arms. All of them looked worried. At the center of the room stood High Chancellor Vextar. He was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like stone. His eyes glowed red when he was angry, and right now they were very bright. Next to him stood Military Coordinator Quindal, a being covered in thick armor that was part of his natural body. "We have received a message," Vextar announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "A message that defies all logic and reason." Taemin took his seat with the other military leaders. He wondered what could be so important. Perhaps another trade dispute? Maybe a minor rebellion on some outer world? Such things happened sometimes, but they were always dealt with quickly. "The message comes from the Sol system," Vextar continued. "From the humans." A wave of confused murmurs went through the chamber. Humans were barely worth thinking about. They had only learned to travel between stars 50 years ago. Their technology was primitive. They controlled just 7 small star systems on the edge of known space. Why would anyone care what humans had to say? Vextar pressed a button, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a human woman in a military uniform. She had black hair tied back and serious dark eyes. The uniform looked simple compared to Dominion military clothing. "I am Admiral Jiwoo Park of the Human Defense Coalition," the hologram said. Her voice was calm and clear. "This message is directed to the leadership of the Galactic Dominion." Taemin leaned forward. He had heard of humans before, but had never seen one speak so directly to Dominion authority. Most species begged or pleaded when they wanted something from the Dominion. "The Galactic Dominion has 72 hours to withdraw all military assets from human space," Admiral Park continued. "You will also cease all interference with human colonies and trade routes. Failure to comply with these demands will result in a formal declaration of war against the Dominion." The chamber exploded into noise. Some representatives laughed loudly. Others shouted in disbelief. A few looked genuinely confused, as if they had not heard correctly. Taemin felt his own surprise. War against the Dominion? The humans had perhaps 300 ships, most of them converted mining vessels or small patrol craft. The Dominion had over 50,000 warships, including planet-killer dreadnoughts and fortress ships the size of moons. "This is madness," declared Senator Crixtel, a being with multiple tentacles for arms. "The humans must have lost their minds. Do they not understand what we are capable of?" High Chancellor Vextar raised his hand for silence. The chamber gradually became quiet again. His red eyes were now glowing so brightly they lit up his face. "Perhaps they need a reminder," Quindal said. His voice sounded like grinding metal. "The Third Fleet is currently on training exercises near the Rigel sector. They could reach human space in 6 days." "The Third Fleet?" Taemin asked. "That seems like using a hammer to crush an insect." "Sometimes," Vextar replied. Insects need to be crushed completely so that other insects remember their place. In a corner of the chamber, Captain Han Sol Kim sat quietly. He was human, one of only a few humans allowed to live and work on Nexus Prime. For the past 5 years, he had served as a liaison officer, helping to handle the few issues that arose between humans and the Dominion. He was supposed to be a bridge between the two peoples. Right now, Han Sol felt very alone. Every eye in the chamber that looked at him showed anger or contempt. He had known this day might come, but he had hoped it never would. The message from Admiral Park did not surprise him as much as it surprised the others. He knew things about human preparations that the Dominion did not know. "Captain Kim," Vextar called out. All heads turned toward the human. "Perhaps you can explain this madness from your people." Han Sol stood up slowly. He could feel hundreds of alien eyes watching him. "I received no advance warning of this message," he said truthfully. "But I can tell you that Admiral Park is not known for making empty threats." "Threats?" Senator Crixtall laughed. "What threats can humans possibly make? Your entire military could not defeat one of our escort squadrons." Han Sol said nothing more. He had learned over the years that arguing with Dominion officials was useless. They believed their own propaganda about their superiority. They had convinced themselves that their technology and numbers made them unbeatable. But Han Sol remembered things from his time on Earth before coming to Nexus Prime. He remembered the secret research facilities he had seen. He remembered conversations that had stopped when he entered rooms. He remembered the look in Admiral Park's eyes when she had personally selected him for this assignment. "The Third Fleet will teach them a lesson they will never forget," Quindal announced. 2,000 warships should be enough to remind the humans of their place in this galaxy. The council session continued for another hour. Plans were made, orders were sent. The great machine of the Dominion military began to move. Throughout the discussion, Han Sol noticed something that the others missed. The Dominion leaders were angry, but they were not taking the human threat seriously. They saw this as an opportunity to demonstrate their power, not as a real challenge. That evening, Han Sol returned to his small quarters on the station. As soon as he entered, his door chimed with an incoming message. The words on his screen made his blood run cold. "All human personnel on Dominion facilities are to be placed under protective custody immediately, for their own safety." Protective custody. Han Sol knew what that really meant. He was now a prisoner. Within minutes, Dominion security forces would arrive at his door. He had perhaps 5 minutes to send a warning back to Earth. His fingers moved quickly over his communication device. The message was short and coded, but Admiral Park would understand it. The Dominion was coming with everything they had. They thought this would be easy. As footsteps approached in the corridor outside, Han Sol deleted the message and prepared to face whatever came next. He thought about Admiral Park's calm voice in that hologram. She had not sounded like someone making an empty threat. She had sounded like someone who was ready for war. The door opened, and Dominion security officers entered. They were polite but firm as they escorted him away. Han Sol went quietly, but his mind was racing. The next few days would change everything. The question was whether the Dominion would realize that before it was too late. Fleet Admiral Korthvan stood on the bridge of his flagship, the massive dreadnought called Eternal Dominion. Through the huge windows, he could see hundreds of other ships spreading out in perfect formation. The Third Fleet was the pride of the Dominion military. 2,000 warships, each one capable of destroying entire cities from orbit. Korthvan was old, even by his species' standards. His thick, armored skin had turned dark gray over his long life. He had fought in 17 major battles and never lost a single one. Today would be his 18th victory, and probably his easiest. "Sir, we are approaching the edge of human space," reported his aide, a young officer named Zelthar. "All ships report ready for combat." "Combat?" Korthvin laughed, a sound like grinding stones. "This will not be combat. This will be pest control. The intelligence reports were clear. Humans had exactly 340 combat vessels. Most were converted mining ships with basic weapons attached. A few were actual warships, but they used primitive technology that was at least 2 centuries behind Dominion standards. The entire human military could not match even one Dominion battle group. "Send a message to all ship commanders," Korthvin ordered. "We will make this quick and clean. Destroy their military assets, but leave their planets intact. We want survivors. To tell the galaxy what happens when someone challenges the Dominion." The fleet moved forward into human space. The first system they entered seemed empty. Long-range sensors showed no ships, no defense platforms, nothing but a few mining stations and communication relays. "Where are they?" asked Zelthar. "Intelligence said they would defend their territory." "Perhaps they ran away," Korthvin said. "Some species are smart enough to know when they are beaten." But then something strange happened. Ships began appearing out of nowhere. One moment, the space around the Dominion fleet was empty. The next moment, dozens of human vessels were there, as if they had simply materialized from nothing. "Impossible," Zelthar whispered. "Our sensors would have detected them." The human ships looked different from what the intelligence reports had described. They were sleek and dark, with smooth lines that seemed to bend light around them. They moved in ways that defied physics, turning and spinning without showing any thrust from engines. Captain Sujin Lee commanded one of those human ships, a destroyer called Soul's Pride. She sat in a special chair that connected directly to her brain through thin cables. Her eyes were closed, but she could see everything around her ship as if she was floating in space herself. "Target the lead dreadnought," she said without opening her eyes. Her voice was calm and steady. "All ships, execute attack pattern Delta." The human ships moved like they were dancing. They flowed around the Dominion formation, never staying in one place long enough for the enemy guns to target them. Their weapons fired beams of pure energy that cut through Dominion shields like they were made of paper. Korthvin watched in growing horror as his ships began to explode around him. "Return fire," he shouted. "All weapons, maximum power." The Dominion ships tried to fight back, but their weapons could not hit targets that moved so fast and unpredictably. Their missiles exploded harmlessly in empty space. Their energy beams hit nothing but darkness. "Sir," Zelthar reported, his voice shaking, "we have lost 37 ships in the first 2 minutes. The humans are using some kind of advanced stealth technology we have never seen before." "Advanced?" Korthvin could not believe what he was hearing. "These are humans. They barely know how to build faster-than-light drives." But the evidence was right in front of him. The human ships were not just advanced, they were beyond anything in the Dominion's technology base. They seemed to exist partially outside normal space, phasing in and out of reality. When Dominion weapons did manage to hit them, the energy simply passed through as if the ships were ghosts. Commander Yuna Choi led a squadron of human fighters in the middle of the battle. Her fighter was tiny compared to the massive Dominion warships, but it moved like a living thing. She was connected to her ship's computer through the same neural interface that Captain Lee used, but she took it even further. "Computer, show me their weak points," she said silently, thinking the words instead of speaking them. Information flowed directly into her brain. She could see the energy patterns of every Dominion ship, the exact locations of their weapon systems, their shield, generators, their engines. The computer analyzed thousands of possibilities in microseconds and showed her exactly where to strike. Her fighter dove between the massive guns of a Dominion cruiser. The guns tried to track her, but they moved too slowly. She fired a single shot at a small panel on the ship's hull. The shot was perfectly placed, hitting the main power coupling for the ship's shields. The cruiser's protective barriers collapsed instantly. "Target eliminated," she reported. Moving to next objective. All. Around the battlefield, human pilots were doing the same thing. They struck with surgical precision, hitting exactly the right spots to disable enemy ships. They did not waste shots or time. Every attack was planned and executed perfectly. Korthovan realized that his fleet was being destroyed by an enemy he had completely underestimated. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships, jump to hyperspace immediately." But when his ships tried to escape, they found they could not. Something was preventing them from entering hyperspace. The humans had deployed devices they called reality anchors, machines that kept space locked in normal dimensions. "We are trapped," Zeltar reported. "Hyperspace drives are not responding." "Then we fight to the death," Korthovan declared. But, even as he said the words, he knew it was hopeless. His mighty fleet was being picked apart piece by piece by ships that should not have been able to challenge even his smallest escorts. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, only 12. Dominion ships remained out of the original 2,000. Korthovan's flagship was heavily damaged, its weapons destroyed, its engines failing. Captain Lee's voice came through the communication system. "Dominion fleet, you are defeated. Surrender now, and your remaining crews will be treated according to the laws of war." Korthovan stared at the human ship floating nearby. It was barely a tenth the size of his dreadnought, but it had single-handedly disabled 3 of his battle cruisers. The captain speaking to him was probably young enough to be his great-granddaughter, yet she had just accomplished what no enemy commander had ever done before. "I surrender," he said quietly. News of the defeat spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The impossible had happened. The mighty Dominion Third Fleet, terror of 1,000 worlds, had been destroyed by a handful of human ships. On Nexus Prime, High Chancellor Vextar received the reports with growing disbelief. "This must be a mistake," he kept saying. "Check the data again." But the data was correct. The humans had not just won a battle, they had won it so completely that it seemed like magic. Worse, they had done it with technology that made Dominion science look primitive. Captain Hansol Kim heard the news from his prison cell. The guards who brought him food were nervous and confused. They kept asking him how this was possible. He just smiled and said nothing. Deep in his heart, Hansol felt proud of his people. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were much more than they appeared to be. The Dominion had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for 3 centuries. Now they faced an enemy that could not be intimidated or overwhelmed. The real war was just beginning. The news of the Third Fleet's destruction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived under Dominion rule for generations whispered the impossible truth to each other. The humans had done what no one thought could be done. They had defeated the Dominion in open battle. High Chancellor Vexitar stood in his private chamber, staring at reports that made no sense. The Third Fleet was gone. 2,000 ships, reduced to scrap metal in 4 hours. The survivors told stories that sounded like madness. Ships that could disappear and reappear at will. Weapons that cut through the strongest shields like they were nothing. Pilots who moved faster than computers could think. "Sir," his aide said carefully, "the Council is demanding answers. They want to know how this happened." Vextar's red eyes burned brighter than ever. "Send word to Fleet Admiral Quinrex. The First Fleet is to deploy immediately to human space. This time, we use everything." The First Fleet was different from the Third Fleet. These were the Dominion's best ships, crewed by their most experienced officers. They carried planet-killer weapons that could turn entire worlds into ash. More importantly, they were commanded by Admiral Quinrex, the most feared military mind in the galaxy. But Admiral Ji-Woo Park was ready for them. She stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Incheon Rising. Unlike the fixed command centers that the Dominion used, her ship could move anywhere in human space within hours. It was built like a fortress but moved like a fighter. "Admiral," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving data from our scout ships. The Dominion First Fleet has 5,000 ships this time. They're bringing their planet destroyers." "Good," Admiral Park said calmly. "The bigger they are, the harder they fall." The human fleet had changed since the first battle. More ships had appeared, seemingly from nowhere. The Dominion intelligence officers who tried to count them gave up in confusion. Human vessels would appear in one system, then vanish, then reappear somewhere completely different. It was like trying to count shadows. Captain Junho Nam commanded one of the most unusual ships in the human fleet. The Daegu Phantom looked normal from the outside, but it could do something no other ship in the galaxy could do. It could exist in multiple dimensions at the same time. "Phase drive charging," his engineer reported. "Ready to engage dimensional shift on your command." "Execute," Junho ordered. The ship began to flicker like a dying light. For a moment, it existed in normal space. Then it shifted slightly, existing in a dimension that overlapped with reality, but was not quite part of it. In this state, the ship could pass through solid matter like it was empty air. The battle for the Vega system became the largest space battle in galactic history. The Dominion First Fleet arrived expecting to fight a normal war against a normal enemy. Instead, they found themselves fighting ghosts and shadows. Human ships appeared inside their formations, firing at point-blank range before disappearing again. The phase ships, like Junho's vessel, materialized inside Dominion hulls, fired their weapons, then shifted back to another dimension before the enemy could respond. Admiral Quinrex had fought in 100 battles across 50 years. He had seen every possible tactic and strategy, but he had never seen anything like this. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his science officers. "Ships cannot simply ignore the laws of physics." "Sir," one of the officers replied nervously, "according to our sensors, they are not ignoring physics. They are using physics we do not understand. The siege of the Vega Fortress world was supposed to be impossible. The planet was surrounded by defensive stations, each one as powerful as a dreadnought. Energy shields covered the entire world. The Dominion had spent centuries making Vega unbreachable. Lieutenant Commander Bo-Ra Shin led the assault teams that proved them wrong. She wore powered armor that made her as strong as a small tank and as fast as a racing car. Her suit was connected to her nervous system, the same way human pilots connected to their ships. She could move and fight with superhuman speed and precision. "Marine teams, prepare for planetary assault," she ordered through her helmet radio. "Remember, we are not here to destroy. We are here to liberate." The human assault ships did not try to break through the shields. Instead, they used the same dimensional technology as the phase ships. They simply appeared on the other side of the barriers, inside the defensive perimeter. Bo-Ra and her Marines landed in the heart of Vega's capital city. The Dominion garrison was large and well-armed, but they had never faced human soldiers before. The humans did not fight like any enemy they knew. They did not line up and charge. They did not use overwhelming firepower. Instead, they used speed, surprise, and intelligence. Bo-Ra's team struck the main command center while two other teams hit the communication hubs. Within minutes, the entire planetary defense network was blind and deaf. The garrison commanders could not talk to each other or coordinate their response. "Target secured," Bo-Ra reported. "Vega defense grid is offline." But the most shocking thing was not how fast the humans won. It was what they did after they won. Instead of destroying the city or enslaving the population, they immediately began providing medical aid and food to civilians. They treated Dominion prisoners according to strict rules of war. They made it clear that they were liberators, not conquerors. Major In-Su Kang proved this during the battle for the Arcturus shipyards. The shipyards were massive structures in space, used to build Dominion warships. The Dominion defenders expected the humans to destroy them. Instead, In-Su's forces captured the shipyards intact. Then they did something unexpected. They turned the construction equipment into weapons. Massive cranes became catapults that threw chunks of metal at enemy ships. Welding lasers became long-range weapons. Assembly robots became soldiers. "Sir," one of his officers asked, "how did you know the shipyard equipment could be used this way?" Insu smiled. "Humans have always been good at making tools, and any tool can be a weapon if you use it right." The message was clear to everyone watching. Humans could turn anything into a weapon and anywhere into a battlefield. They did not need special equipment or perfect conditions. They adapted to whatever situation they found. News networks across the galaxy began showing footage that the Dominion could not stop. Videos of human soldiers helping alien children. Pictures of human medics treating wounded Dominion troops. Stories of human commanders offering surrender terms that were actually fair and honest. For the first time in 3 centuries, ordinary beings across the galaxy began to hope. If the mighty Dominion could be defeated, if their fleets could be destroyed and their fortresses captured, then maybe change was possible. On the industrial world of Kepler 186f, a human named Jae-Sung-Yu stood before a crowd of alien workers. He had been a prisoner there for 2 years, forced to work in the factories that built Dominion weapons. Now he spoke to his fellow prisoners about something they had almost forgotten. "Freedom," he said simply. "Not the freedom that someone gives you, but the freedom you take for yourself." The workers listened. Some were afraid, but others began to nod. They had seen the news reports. They knew the humans were winning. And if humans could defeat the Dominion military, maybe ordinary workers could defeat their overseers. The rebellion began that night. It spread to 17 systems within a week. The Dominion Empire, built on fear and overwhelming force, began to crack. Their enemies were no longer just human soldiers with impossible ships. Their enemies were their own people, inspired by human example. Admiral Park received reports of the uprisings with quiet satisfaction. This was what she had hoped for. Military victory was not enough. Real change required the galaxy's peoples to free themselves. The war was far from over, but already it was clear that nothing would ever be the same again. The rebellion on Kepler 186f had spread like a disease that the Dominion could not cure. What started with one human speaking to a crowd of workers had become a galaxy-wide revolution. 17 systems were now in open revolt, and more joined every day. Jae-Sung-Yu stood in what used to be the planet's administrative center. The Dominion governor had fled 3 days ago, leaving behind only a few loyal guards who surrendered without a fight. Now the building served as headquarters for the newly formed Workers' Liberation Council. "The Dominion forces are retreating from the Centauri sector," reported a Zephyrian engineer whose people had been enslaved for over a century. "They cannot fight the humans and control rebellions at the same time." Jae-Sung nodded. This was exactly what Admiral Park had planned. The human military was not trying to conquer the galaxy by force. They were creating conditions for oppressed peoples to free themselves. It was smarter than any strategy the Dominion had ever seen. Admiral Woo Jin Ryu commanded the human liberation fleets that were now operating in 30 different systems. His ships did not come as conquerors. They came as helpers, providing weapons and supplies to rebel groups while protecting them from Dominion retaliation. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're receiving surrender requests from 6 more Dominion garrison commanders. They want to negotiate terms." "Standard offer," Woo Jin replied. "Safe passage off-world for any troops who lay down their arms, medical care for the wounded, fair treatment for prisoners, and full pardons for anyone willing to help rebuild their worlds as free societies." These offers shocked Dominion military officers. They were used to wars where defeat meant death or slavery. The idea that an enemy would treat them fairly seemed impossible. Many commanders who might have fought to the death instead chose to surrender. Captain Hye Jin Ko had perhaps the most important job in the human fleet. She commanded the diplomatic ships that made contact with alien species across the galaxy. Her mission was not to threaten or demand, but to offer something that had never existed before in galactic politics. She stood on the bridge of her ship as it approached the homeworld of the Crystalline Coalition, a group of silicon-based life forms that had been forced to serve the Dominion for 200 years. Their planet looked like a giant jewel floating in space, covered with cities that grew like crystals from the ground. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. They're asking what we want from them." "Tell them," Hyejin replied, "that we want to give them something, not take it." The crystalline leaders were confused by this answer. No one had ever come to their world offering gifts without demanding something in return. When Hyejin explained that humans were willing to share their military technology freely with any species ready to fight for independence, the crystal's reaction was visible across their entire planet. Their cities began glowing brighter as excitement spread through their collective consciousness. Within hours, the Galactic Liberation Alliance had its newest member. The Crystallines brought something valuable to the Alliance. They had the best communication networks in the galaxy. Their crystal-based technology could send messages instantly across thousands of light years. The Alliance grew almost overnight. The avian sky hunters joined, bringing their knowledge of atmospheric combat. The deep-sea leviathans offered their expertise with underwater worlds. The nomadic star wanderers provided intelligence about Dominion movements from their travels between systems. Each species brought unique abilities, but they all brought the same thing: a desperate desire for freedom that had been suppressed. For centuries, the Dominion's response became increasingly desperate. High Chancellor Vextar authorized the use of weapons that had been banned for good reasons. Stellar destroyers that could make stars explode, quantum viruses that could corrupt entire computer networks, temporal bombs that could erase sections of time itself. The first stellar destroyer was deployed against the human colony world of New Busan. The weapon was designed to cause the system's star to go supernova, destroying everything within several light years. It should have been the ultimate demonstration of Dominion power. Instead, it became a demonstration of human preparedness. The entire population of New Busan, over 50 million people, was evacuated in less than 6 hours. Human evacuation. Protocols turned every available ship into a rescue vessel. Cargo haulers, passenger liners, even small personal craft worked together to save lives. The star exploded on schedule, but it destroyed only empty buildings. Every living being had been taken to safety. The message was clear. The Dominion could destroy human worlds, but they could not destroy the human people. The quantum virus attack failed even more completely. When the Dominion released their most advanced computer weapon against human networks, it simply disappeared. Human artificial intelligence systems absorbed the virus, studied it, and used it to trace back to its source. Within hours, human hackers had infected the Dominion's own computer networks with improved versions of their own weapon. The temporal bomb was never used. The weapon was being prepared on a secret Dominion research station when General Kyung-ho Park led a strike force that captured the facility intact. The humans did not destroy the weapon. Instead, they studied it, learned from it, and developed defenses against it. "Every weapon they use against us makes us stronger," General Park explained to his officers. "We learn from their attacks and find ways to turn their own technology against them." The general was Admiral Park's younger brother, but his specialty was ground combat rather than space battles. His forces had penetrated deeper into Dominion territory than any enemy in 3 centuries. They moved so fast that Dominion defenses could not react in time. The core worlds of the Dominion had not seen war in hundreds of years. Their populations had grown soft and complacent, protected by the military might that kept the rest of the galaxy in line. When human ships appeared in their skies, panic spread faster than the news. But the humans did not attack civilian targets. They struck military bases, government centers, and communication hubs with surgical precision. They made it clear that their war was with the Dominion system, not with ordinary people who happened to live under Dominion rule. The Dominion Council began to fracture as member species realized that their side was losing. Some began sending secret messages to human representatives, asking about terms for switching sides. Others simply declared neutrality and withdrew their forces from Dominion service. Emperor Zex Thul of the Reptilian Hegemony was the first major Dominion ally to publicly change sides. His people had been founding members of the Dominion, but even he could see which way the wind was blowing. "The humans offer us partnership as equals," he announced to his people. "The Dominion has only ever offered us the choice between obedience and destruction. I choose partnership." His defection caused a cascade of similar announcements. Within a week, half of the Dominion's member species had either switched sides or declared neutrality. The empire that had ruled for 3 centuries was crumbling from within. On Nexus Prime, High Chancellor Vextar stared at reports that showed his empire disappearing before his eyes. His red eyes had dimmed to a dull glow. For the first time in his long life, he began to consider the impossible. Perhaps it was time to consider surrender. Captain Hansol Kim heard the news from his guards, who were now treating him more like a guest than a prisoner. The balance of power had shifted so completely that even the Dominion security forces were beginning to wonder if they had chosen the wrong side. The galaxy was changing. The old order built on fear and oppression was dying. In its place, something new was being born, a community of free peoples working together by choice rather than compulsion. The final battle would not be fought with weapons. It would be fought with words and ideas in the halls of power. Ambassador Young Mi Lim walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime with steady steps. The massive space station that had once been the symbol of Dominion power now felt like a tomb. Half the lights were dimmed to save energy. Most of the offices were empty as species after species recalled their representatives. She carried no weapons and brought no guards. Behind her walked only a small diplomatic team and Captain Hansol Kim, who had been released from prison that morning. The white flag of truce that preceded them seemed almost unnecessary. Everyone in the galaxy knew why she was here. High Chancellor Vextar waited in the main council chamber. The room that had once held representatives from 800 star systems now contained fewer than 50 beings. Most were from the core Dominion worlds that had nowhere else to go. Their empire was dying, and they all knew it. "Ambassador Lim," Vextar said as she entered. His red eyes were dim now, like dying embers. "You come to accept our surrender?" "No," Young Mi replied calmly. "I come to offer you something better than surrender. I come to offer you a chance to help build a new galaxy." The remaining Dominion. Officials looked confused. They had expected demands for punishment, requirements for reparations, or at least some form of humiliation. Instead, this human woman spoke about building something together. "The old Dominion is finished," Young Mi continued. "But the people who lived under it still need homes, still need food, still need hope for the future. We did not come here to destroy everything you built. We came to change it." She activated a holographic projector that showed a document. The text appeared in dozens of languages so that every being in the chamber could read it in their own script. "These are the Galactic Accords," she explained. "The principles that will govern our new community of worlds. No species has the right to dominate another. All peoples have the right to determine their own government. Trade will be voluntary and fair. Military force will be used only to defend the innocent." Former Admiral Tae Min, who had lost his entire fleet to human forces, stood up slowly. "And what of those who serve the Dominion? What happens to us?" "You have 3 choices," Young Mi answered. "You can return to your homeworlds and live as private citizens. You can help us rebuild damaged worlds and make amends for past wrongs. or you can join the new Galactic Defense Force and help protect the freedom we have won." The silence in the chamber was complete. These were not the terms of a conqueror speaking to the defeated. These were the words of someone offering genuine partnership. Military Coordinator Quindal, whose armored body showed scars from a dozen battles, asked the question that everyone was thinking. "Why? You have won everything. You could rule the galaxy as we did. Why offer us mercy?" Young Mai smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "Because ruling through fear and force is what the Dominion did. We are not the Dominion. We believe that people work better together when they choose to cooperate rather than when they are forced to obey." The signing ceremony took place 3 days later. Representatives from over 400 worlds gathered in the same chamber where the Dominion had once made its decisions. But this time, they came as equals, rather than subjects. Admiral Jiwoo Park stood to address the new Galactic Assembly. She wore a simple military uniform without the elaborate decorations that Dominion officials had favored. Her words were broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. "For 3 centuries, this galaxy was ruled by fear," she began. "Species obeyed the Dominion because they were afraid of what would happen if they did not. Today, we choose a different path. We choose cooperation over domination. We choose partnership over slavery. We choose hope over fear." The applause that followed was not the forced enthusiasm that Dominion speeches had received. It was genuine celebration from beings who had never expected to see this day. Captain Sang-Wook Hwang was chosen to command the new Galactic Defense Force. The organization was unlike anything that had existed before. Instead of one species dominating others, it was truly integrated. Human tactical knowledge combined with crystalline communication technology. Avian pilots worked alongside human neural interface specialists. Aquatic species provided underwater expertise, while nomadic peoples shared their knowledge of deep space. "Our job is not to conquer," Sang-Wook explained to his new officers. "Our job is to protect. We defend worlds that cannot defend themselves. We keep trade routes safe. We make sure that no new dominion can ever rise to enslave the galaxy again." The transition was not easy. 3 centuries of oppression could not be undone overnight. Some worlds had been so damaged by Dominion rule that they needed decades of help to rebuild. Others struggled with the concept of freedom after generations, of being told what to do. But progress came steadily. Trade networks that had once existed only to serve Dominion needs were restructured to benefit everyone. Scientific knowledge that had been hoarded by the core worlds was shared freely. Technologies that had been restricted to the military were adapted for civilian use. Jae-Sung Yu became the first elected leader of the reformed Kepler 186F. His planet, which had once been an industrial slave world, transformed itself into a center of democratic governance. Other worlds sent representatives to learn how former slaves could build a free society. "Freedom is not something you achieve once and then forget about," he told the visiting delegations. "Freedom is something you must choose every day. You must choose to treat others fairly. You must choose to share power instead of hoarding it. You must choose to help the weak instead of exploiting them." The former Dominion core worlds faced the biggest challenges. Their entire societies had been built around ruling others. Now they had to learn how to live as equals among the peoples they had once oppressed. Some adapted well. The Altarians, Admiral Taemin's people, became known for their skill at mediation and conflict resolution. They used their understanding of galactic politics to help resolve disputes peacefully. Others struggled more. The hegemon worlds had difficulty accepting that they were no longer the center of the galaxy. But even they began to change as younger generations grew up in the new system. Captain Hansol Kim returned to Earth for the first time in 7 years. The world he found was different from the one he had left. Humanity had become the most respected species in the galaxy, but they had not let success change their fundamental values. Children in schools across human space learned about the war, not as a great victory, but as a necessary step toward building something better. They studied the mistakes of the Dominion alongside human achievements, learning both what to do and what never to do again. The memorial to the war was built not on Earth, but on a small planet that had been one of the Dominion's first conquests. The monument honored not just human soldiers, but all beings who had died fighting for freedom. The inscription was simple: they died so that others might live free. Admiral Park, now retired from military service, often visited the memorial. She would stand before the long lists of names and remember the price that freedom had cost. But she would also look up at the stars and see ships from dozens of species traveling freely between worlds, trading and exploring and building together. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still problems to solve, still people who missed the old certainties of Dominion rule. But for the first time in centuries, beings across the galaxy went to sleep knowing that tomorrow would be their choice to make. A message went out from Earth to the farthest corners of known space. It was not a demand for tribute or a threat of conquest. It was an invitation to explore, to grow, to build something better among the stars. It was a promise that no matter how far into the darkness they traveled, they would not travel alone. The age of dominion was over. The age of cooperation had begun.